So we're back on record, and thank you, Mr. Kane. You're going to take us to the Gupta case and the settlement with Uber.
Yes, thank you. Well, this was a case where Amita Gupta was sacked for being about a few minutes late for a delivery. It was a harsh, unfair dismissal, and the TWU on the Gupta's behalf took up an appeal for them after they had failed at first instance in taking the case to the Fair Work Commission. The Fair Work Commission made a ruling. We appealed that ruling to the full bench of the Federal Court of Australia. Sometime in December last year, the full Federal Court conducted a days-long hearing in relation to the Gupta's case. In that case, the various members of the court spent a significant period of time systematically unpicking the fiction of Uber Eats' arrangements. In fact, Uber Eats was attempting to tell the court that these workers, like Amita, were not employees, and they were not even independent contractors. In fact, they were some kind of agent that was just there to facilitate a connection between restaurants and people who wanted food. Now, the Federal Court of Australia, in very pointed questioning to the Uber Council, made it very clear that this was a fiction that really was going to be unable to sustain through even the mildest scrutiny, and that really what was happening here was that Amita was directly engaged by Uber Eats to perform a transport service, and that there were questions about whether her termination was fair or unfair, indeed harsh and unreasonable. It was very clear, and it's very clear to anyone from a reading of that transcript, that the full bench was completely unimpressed with Uber's approach. And in fact, post that case and the settlement of the case, Uber changed, as it always does, when there's danger that its exploitative model would be in any way impinged upon. It changed and tweaked its contracts to deal with what might have been the effects of that case. But the most telling feature, Senator, the most telling feature of this settlement was the extent of the settlement. Amita Gupta, even if she had won an unfair dismissal case, would have been entitled to probably a maximum of around about $15,000 for 6 months' work. The settlement that was made was $400,000. This I provided in an answer to a direct question from the Senate committee. It is subject to a settlement document, but I think it's very clear that Uber Eats wanted to ensure that there was no risk that its exploitative system would be overturned by the full federal court, and they were willing to pay an incredible amount of money, a life-changing amount of money for the Guptas to ensure that that moment in time did not occur. Senator.
I just want to remind and assure you that in giving evidence to a parliamentary committee, witnesses are protected by parliamentary privilege against any use of their evidence against them in legal proceedings. Furthermore, it is unlawful under Section 12 of the Act for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee. Such sanctions may also be treated by either House of the Parliament as a contempt. To reassure you, Mr. Kane, about your openness as a witness and expectations on answering questions here.